Mini episode 388 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.info.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
30 seconds. In front of all these people, you're going to pull out a gun and you're going to shoot an unarmed man. 20 seconds. So what are you going to do? 10.
Welcome to the FDH Lounge and the Justified episode recap.
It was justified.
With your original dignitaries,
Fire in the hole!
Rick Morris and Jason Jones.
You got ice cold water running through your veins.
Breaking down each Justified episode the moment they've concluded.
Did you take a peek inside the soul of Raylan and you?
I'm just going to let that old dog lie.
Real-time reactions. Next level analysis.
You seem to be harboring a bit of hostility there, brother.
So I've been told.
And now, your dignitaries.
Well, I believe we can take her from here.
Welcome, everybody, to mini episode number 388 of the FDH Lounge. This is your Justified episode recap for episode 5.8. And what we've got for you here tonight, I have on the phone lines the gentleman who is the George St. Eaglon to my Gil Faison. I won't say the Liz greatly anger him. We have for you the program that even the rich dicks would say is better than getting schniefed in the dome. I bring on the phone lines Jason Jones as I, Rick Morris, the other original dignitary, get ready to discuss this with you. Jason, how you doing, my man? How you like that intro?
Not bad. Which Liz am I? Am I Kroll at least? Because everything would dictate that you're Kroll, which means I'd really not be happy.
You don't want to be pretty, Liz?
No. If you're gonna do it, let's sell it big time. Real quick though, before you jump into it, I gotta apologize in advance. Try to visualize. I'm sitting at the end of the couch, literally like 3 feet from the TV, volume on 50, while I've got three women, two dogs, a cat, and a toddler interfering with my Justified time. So I apologize if something gets lost in the cracks along the way.
Okay. Well,
I got the mother-in-law's in town.
Yes, that's always a very intriguing time in the life of anybody. That was my little protest, by the way, in terms of Comedy Central putting Kroll Show up against Justified. I'm very happy that Hulu Plus is showing it and allowing me to catch up on Kroll Show, even though I'm missing it in real time. Come on, man. There is so little appointment viewing in my life. There are so few things that I set my watch to that I have to watch on TV. Two of them are running.
I am envious of you in that regard because today I got voted out because right now I've got Justified and Kroll Show recorded at the same time, and then one of the ladies I just mentioned said, "Oh, About a Boy," and some other stupid sitcom. So I actually had to void out the Kroll Show recording, miss this week's episode, so that other people can watch something I have no intention of watching.
I hope for your sake this was not an episode that was heavy with John Mulaney. I know that he is an all-time favorite of yours. I will mention also, I checked out
Liz and Liz heavy, and we don't have Too Much Tuna or Rich Dicks or Wheels Ontario, I will feel I dodged a bullet.
I'll tell you, too. I know you're a big fan. I finally got around to seeing John Mulaney's Comedy Central special as I've been going through those also on Hulu Plus, and really enjoyed it. So I'm starting, as I'm getting more familiar with him, I'm getting to see why you are the big fan that you are. But I know that you are a big fan also of Justified. That's the point of us doing this in the first place here. So I was kind of musing to myself here before we got started in terms of I don't really know where we're going with 5 episodes left. I mean, tonight there were some things that were put on the table. You have the sense there at the end that Boyd does really know what's going on, that the Krolls are running an inside. There I go, the Krolls. The Crows are running an inside game on him, and he's starting to sense that. You got Wendy, who almost seemed half ready to give up her brothers to Raylan, but was just using it to string them along there. Raylan gets dumped at the very end. I don't think that's going to be very consequential to the storylines, but stranger things have happened. I feel like I'm in the same spot I was at the end of the last episode. I just feel like anything can happen from here on in, and I don't really feel like I have a blueprint like I did at this point the last 3 seasons. How do you see it?
Well, let me just start at the back and work back to the front. The Amy Smart character breaking it off with Raylan, I literally am sitting there watching what already had unfolded in this episode, and I kind of just sat back in my chair and went, yeah, I'm strangely comfortable with that. I'm good. You can go away now.
He's annoying to me.
Let's be honest, Raylan's coming from a place of, Winona and Ava. This is side dish trim. Let's be real about it.
Absolutely.
She wasn't going to make a long-term thing with this character, and she's problematic. No. And Rachel pointed that out episodes ago. Is that she's just not for you. It's not a good idea. Get out of it what you got to, and then move on. So I'm fine with that. Going back to the episode as a whole, I went into this episode thinking, oh, snap, we're coming off of the Art v. Raylan situation. You've got the Crow family getting mixed in with the Crowder operation. We saw a firefight at the end of the last episode, and I'm thinking the avalanche snowball is starting to gain speed as we head down the mountainside. And I'm sorry, but this episode, and don't get me wrong, any Justified episode is great TV. But when we're coming from places with, there was that almost mid-season episode that was just bananas, and then previous episodes like, from drawing a blank, the one you're such a fan of from last year.
Oh, that was Convoy.
Yeah, Convoy. We've got some episodes that are epically amazing, and then this one just kind of left me wanting. I guess I'd love to give you some sort of metaphor, but I don't want to get too weird about it. So let's just say this: by the time the episode is over, I didn't have that oh crap moment. I didn't have that thing oh my goodness, I can't wait to get to next week. I'm left here thinking they must be trying to set up a whole bunch of stuff, because there was no payoff in this episode. We didn't get closure on whatever the Crows are doing. We didn't find out, Raylan didn't find out what's going on in Mexico. We got really nothing going on except now we know that that Kendall and What's-Her-Face are not siblings. I mean, there really wasn't a big moment in this episode. Now, it may be that transitional thing that we needed to get back on track, and I hope that's the case. But I'm at a loss. I don't know what to think from this episode other than I am slightly unimpressed. I do wish that they would stop beating up Ava, though. Let's go back to Pretty Ava, because that's run its course.
Yeah, we got some more yet to come with that, I'm sure, because I'd heard this was going to be a storyline going through the season, but I hear you on that. But I will say, too, I mean, in all fairness to what we have just put out there, I share your feeling of being underwhelmed as a viewer tonight, and again, I'm a little bit impatient to kind of see where this is going, but it's really kind of remarkable that on a show like this, you and I give them such a benefit of the doubt, and it's because they've earned it. It's one of these things of where we're not ranting and raving about what did you waste my time for. I mean, you and I think, both have the same sense of this didn't really seem to advance anything. But again, I think we both have the sense that in retrospect, this is probably going to look like a puzzle piece that fits just the right way, and that's the slack, that's the latitude we give them. You and I are willing to have weeks that are not as sensational as the other weeks because we know the payoff is coming, and that's again, it's a testament to the trust that they've earned from us and probably everyone else who would agree with what we're saying.
Absolutely. The funny thing is, I got in a conversation with somebody that had nothing to do with Justified, but just sort of in a, pop culture-y sort of way, we have our favorites. And the question was, how bad does it have to get before you kind of just walk away and say, maybe it wasn't what I thought? And I think with Justified, I would literally have to see an entire season that just failed to hit the mark, every episode, inside and out, every storyline, because they have earned it. And we may only be, a season and a half away from the conclusion of the whole story. But I think by the time you concluded season 2, they were given a leash long enough that they can have episodes like this where they do what you have to as a team to set things up. And if that's the case, we're going to be talking after, the season finale. We're not going to be talking about this episode. We may reference how well it set up something, but I think we all know that come season finale, we're going to have to pick our brains up off the floor because it's going to be what Justified tends to be. And if I got to take one or two, less than edge of my seat type episodes, I can do that because the payoff will be worth it.
Well, I pretty much agree with what you're saying there. And, again, this is going to make sense by the end of the season. We know this. And it's kind of funny when you said that it would take an entire season of something going very bad for you to give up on it, because if you look at it now, it's a thing where we know next season is the last season. So essentially, if you didn't like season 1 or season 6 start to finish, that's it. I'm done with this show. Oh, wait a minute, it's done. So they've got us at this point where we're going to be watching it all the way through.
And we like to
understandable.
We like to take some time and make correlations to other shows, and you have made no hesitation on referencing The Shield as well as some other shows, which I have something for, by the way, when you want to enter our Shield segment of the show.
Nice. Okay.
But The West Wing, for me, is the one show that I will never stop watching. For those that don't know, and this probably won't come as a surprise to you, I just finished the Supremes episode, which I think is episode 17 of season 5 for the 33rd time. I mean, I've watched this show more than Aaron Sorkin has. So I love it without question. But even that show at one point, you kind of thought as we get to the end, like, well, something's different. It's not what it used to be, but I will ride it out because they've been so good for so long. And you get that same feeling from Justified is that, like I said before, I think the Mags Bennett storyline and season was enough to keep me in for the duration. So I'm not going to eat their lunch over this episode, even though, as an immediate reaction, it wasn't as exciting as I thought it might have been an hour ago.
Well, those are very good points, and again, I really have a lot of the same thoughts that you do in terms of them having the benefit of the doubt. And I guess we can start to get to some of our crossover points here, as tonight, like we said, was kind of lacking, at least in the immediate aftermath of things that really mean a lot going forward. Boyd ran into a kerfluffle in Mexico at the beginning of the episode, which was a carryover from last week, ran into another one later on. They got out of it. In the course of that, we found out that, again, he was starting to be on to what the Crows were doing. We know that Jimmy speaks fluent Spanish, a very interesting character wrinkle for somebody who's always been supremely in the background, speaks and understands it, which I think was part of the key to cracking the code on what the Crows were doing, because he heard a couple of the dudes speaking in Espanol. But I want to get to this one note here as far as the abduction of Kendall. There was something that was a little bit of a misdirection that I read last week from Graham Yost. He, of course, gives those great interviews every week to Entertainment Weekly at their EW.com website, where he breaks down what happened on the show and talks about what's upcoming. And that was when I told you, hey, hold on to your hats for 5.5. That was going to be the big one, because that was what Graham Yost had said. He was talking last week about this Uncle Jack character, and, he's going to be bad news. I want to back up for a second and say this. I know, Jason, you're not at the point yet on Breaking Bad, but there is a point, season 5, Breaking Bad, as you come down the stretch, there's an Uncle Jack character that is a supreme badass, absolutely supreme. You would cross the street to get away from this mofo. So Graham Yost talking about an Uncle Jack, that seems like a little bit of mischief, especially when you see tonight that the guy was just kind of a ne'er-do-well, because that's not the mental image I had if they're going to call somebody Uncle Jack. I thought he was deliberately playing off of Breaking Bad, trying to get us thinking one way. He delivers another kind of a character, particularly because, and this is where we get to our weekly Shield crossover. This is something I have forgotten to bring up the last couple of weeks, but ever since I got into the Shield, I really kind of noticed it. A little bit of mischief on the part of the Justified writers. The character Mara, who was married to Lee the Undertaker, Okay, Shane Vendrell on the Shield, who was played by Walton Goggins. His wife, a real Skylar White-esque type character. I think you will be cursing her when you go to watch the Shield. Her name was Mara. It's not like the most common name in the world. I believe it was even spelled the same way, M-A-R-A. And so they used the exact same name of his wife on another show and put him in a lot of scenes with her. So they've done this now a couple of times, appropriating a name from another show. And I will tell you, the two Maras had a lot more in common than the two Uncle Jacks. So well played, Graham Yost. You had me thinking of one kind of character, and you delivered quite another.
You know, what's funny about that is when you get into the nuts and bolts of trying to create something like this, you know, you find yourself trying to come up with names and trying to, you know, give a name that fits the character and so on. And then you find out that character's been done, or that name is too closely similar to somebody else. And then you go out and break out the baby books and try to find names. And it's a little bit more difficult than the average person probably conceives. However, on the other side of that coin, that's a strange, very strange coincidence. And I find it absolutely implausible that was a detail that they didn't know about. I think it either was a detail they absolutely knew about and said, I'm fine with it. It was something they said no one's going to care, or that's a great way to sort of flirtatiously tease something. So one way or the other, they're either perfectly okay with the coincidence or it's not a coincidence. So once again, we may have stumbled onto something.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you what, the Maras on The Shield and Justified both had dark hair, I believe dark straight hair in both cases. I think black hair in both cases, to carry it even a step further. But again, both of them have a real kind of a schemer streak to them in different ways. But there are just a lot of similarities between the two Maras. And again, a lot of it is just, you know, surface deep, but similarities nonetheless. The two Uncle Jacks, could not be more dissimilar. Again, this guy more or less just a harmless bumbler. The Uncle Jack from Breaking Bad, spoiler alert, Jason, anything but a harmless bumbler. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Before the episode started, was the Uncle Jack the thing that was going to blow my mind?
Which one are we talking about here?
You had texted me before the show started that you were going to blow my mind with something from this episode. No. I have something different, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit. Actually, you know what? Let me get to that right after. No, my last point for the Shield for the night, and then I'm done. Shane Vendrell, of course, the character of Walton Goggins on there. Walton Goggins, as we keep saying, the crossover point between the two shows, the actor. Just a little bit of a funny that I wanted to put in front of you here. A scene where Shane Vendrell, when his son was born from his wife Mara, of course, and there was a spoiler alert. There was a period of time there where he and Vic Mackey, the boss on the strike force, where they were a little bit personally and professionally estranged. So Vic didn't immediately know when the kid was born. So he met up with him a little period of time afterwards, congratulated him on it, and asked him the name of his son. And Shane says, Jackson. Now keep in mind that he plays a native Southerner on that show, a transplant to Los Angeles also. Vic looks at him kind of quizzically and says, Michael? And Shane just kind of scowls back at him and says, Stonewall. So I thought that was kind of funny, something that Boyd might have perhaps approved of as far as naming his son after Stonewall Jackson. But the thing that I wanted to mention to you, and you put out that excellent point last week, and I would like to think that this is the synergy of working on a show like this with you, with a guy who's really this far into it, picks up these things. It spurs you subconsciously or otherwise to pick up your own game. I had a revelation in the shower today, of all places, as I sometimes do. I'm thinking back to season 1, and I'm just kind of thinking to tonight, just what kind of points can I put out there, and then it hit me right between the eyes. Boyd's down there in Mexico, and you go back to the beginning of the show, and Boyd is now tied up with the cartels. And this is actually kind of a similarity to The Shield also, because there is a crime that is committed in the pilot of The Shield that plays through the entire course of the series. It gets referenced
at various points in time, and it becomes crucial to the culmination of the series. On Justified, what do we keep coming back to? What's the show named after? The shooting of Tommy Bucks, and it was justified. Legally, anyways, in Miami. But what's the backstory? And Jason, you watched the pilot very recently. You would know this.
Oh, what?
Well, here's what I'm thinking. Because that guy killed one of Raylan's colleagues in Latin America while Raylan watched, put the dynamite in his mouth, duct taped it or whatever, blew the guy to bits. That was what drove Raylan to want to kill him. I think this whole thing with the cartel with Mexico, I'm just going to put my stake in the ground and say this. I think we're going to come full circle on that. I think eventually, before all is said and done, you keep talking about, and you have since the beginning of this season, you said it in episode 1, talking about the wider world. I think you also kind of did when Quarles came into the picture, when we were doing our retrospective of past seasons. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that of course, we know by the end of this season, Raylan is going to get involved with Boyd's operation, trying to shut it down probably, unless, Boyd plays him off against somebody else. I think this whole thing of introducing the notion of cartels back into this thing, Latin America back into this thing, I think it's no consequence. So I'm going to go out on that limb, Jason, and I'm prepared for anybody to saw it off. But I think as we start to come down the stretch for this show, 5 more episodes in this season, 13 in the final season next year, I think this is going to tie into the end game. I think it's going to be critical to it, as a matter of fact.
Wow, that's to the casual viewer that's listening to this, that might not sound like a big deal, but there's no doubt that they've really done an excellent job of planting this, using misdirection. Going back to the pilot episode, there's things in place there that come up later. There are things that they keep referencing back. And the irony is that in most cases, especially in the cold open of a show's pilot episode, the vast majority of everything you see, hear, smell, experience is important enough that it means something later. So, I mean, in the back of my mind, I guess I always thought that would be relevant. I didn't know necessarily that it would come back around like that. I think the big issue with that is if that's true and the series ends with Raylan Givens' demise, I'm going to be upset. Because the cartels generally don't believe in an eye for an eye. That would be too simple. But I think that this very well could open up the door to a little bit more exposure into what exactly did happen in Mexico, or wherever it was, where that went down. I think you're absolutely right that this Mexican storyline probably comes to a head by season finale, and then becomes the big bad elephant in the room for all of season 6. I think for a long time now we've been building to the idea that the second half of season 5 will lead into season 6, and it won't be season 2 to season 3 and season 3 to season 4, where they were very concisely separate stories. So with all that said, I got to let my mind wrap itself around that idea, but there's nothing that I can say that would disprove it right now. I think you might have absolutely stumbled upon something. And real quick, the irony of all this is that, as you say it, based on a transition from the Shield, I am 60% of the way through the pilot episode. So some of that makes sense to me.
Okay.
We've had different outlets and ways for me to watch it, short of just going out and buying the seasons on DVD. And I did find, for those of you who are also interested in what the heck is Rick talking about all the time, every week, you can see all of season 1 on Crackle, which is available in all of your smartphone app stores.
Free. Yes, it's free. I hadn't noticed that it was on Crackle yet, but that's a great point. And again, Walton Goggins, and this was another thought that had come to mind also here, the common denominator between these shows. from 2002 to 2008 on the Shield. This run is going to be 2010 to 2015 when Justified wraps up. That is truly amazing that from 2002 to 2015, aside from 2009, he will have been anchoring one of the great dramas on TV on FX, 2 different shows, obviously, but really kind of amazing testament to his run. There was another thing that I picked up on as well. And again, what I put out to you there is just a theory, but I was kind of, I guess, following that strand down the road when you kind of got me thinking back about the origins of the show. And I'm actually sort of going pre-pilot here in what I'm thinking, because there are things that are referenced in the pilot, but it's all backstory about Raylan, Latin America, the cartels. But there's something I picked up on tonight, and we did a little bit more character examination earlier in the season because the plot was kind of slower to develop. And this being a night tonight where it seems like the plot was kind of like moving forward, maybe in gravy or some kind of thick, molasses or something. Maybe we have a little bit more time to talk character tonight about Raylan. I should feel worse for him than I do about the way that he got strung along by Sister Crow there. But I keep coming back to it. He really, for somebody who's a law enforcement officer and at heart a good guy, he did not come across as a sympathetic character the way he kept pressing her at every opportunity tonight. When this is over, you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me what you need to tell me on this. I almost wonder if we're getting to the point of where, and they're not going to make it a plot point, they're not going to diagnose him as such, but almost socially, does Raylan almost have like a mild form of Asperger's? Because he really does not have any kind of sense of how he comes across to people a lot of times. Doesn't really care. Maybe he's just got a little bit of an a-hole streak in him. I don't know. But they just seem to keep kind of circling back around to that. And we're seeing a lot of that with him this year, where he's just kind of like dealing in his own funk with his issues. And, again, he never properly dealt with all of his issues with Arlo. He's got all the trepidation about now that he's got a kid. I'm sure he doesn't like having his heart broken by Winona. But the way that it's manifesting itself here, I'm sure you've noticed many instances like this as well. You see it when he's around the office. You see it sometimes with Rachel or with Tim, the way that he's not always properly appreciative of stuff when they do something for him. I'm really almost, again, the Asperger's thing, I'm not meaning to play psychiatrist at home or anything like that, but it's getting to be a recurring motif, and I thought they hit us over the head with it pretty good tonight.
No, look, this is all part of diving into the deconstruction of the characters, because if we go back to the beginning, it's almost like, shot a guy. I was justified. I pulled, he's dead. Big deal. But there were still moments where he would laugh and joke, and, like there's that line in the pilot where Art's telling him about Boyd, and he said, you familiar with a fellow named Boyd Crowder? And he's like, well, gee, Art, you going to dump everything in my lap at once? It's just very lighthearted. It's still kind of fun. Let's do the job. But there was still some joy in things from time to time, and it could have been anything. This season, though, it's almost like the situation on the tarmac started it. And maybe even started before that, but you started to see where, and again, I am not like you said, I'm not an expert in psychology or anything, but the basis, the psychosis of the character tells me that wasn't a little thing. When Winona and the kid were threatened, and then that developed, and now we're at a point where it's almost like he dives into work to avoid life instead of the other way around. And that could be a big telling feature as we go along, because I can't tell you the last time we've had sort of Happygolucky Raylan, because every single time it's happened, something bad happens from it. You had the lady with the boxer boyfriend and the chickens. That didn't even end well. And now we've got the Amy Smart situation. Whether it was a big deal or not is ending a way he's probably not happy with. So it seems like every time we do see Raylan sort of relax and live it a little for a second, it tends to burn him. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually a bigger thing than even you're letting on to. And I think we've all seen it. We just kind of just like, well, it's Raylan. He'll snap back around, but maybe he won't. Maybe that's a big part of what eventually is going to happen. But I would say it's absolutely real, and it's probably bigger than most people think it is today.
Well, the track that he's going down, you said before that the thing that would bum you out the most is if in the end of the series, if he does end up fighting it, whether it be from the cartel or anybody else. And I highly doubt that that's how they're going to end this thing. I don't think that's how a series that's inspired by Elmore Leonard's characters and writing would end. Graham Yost and all of them ask themselves now, what would Elmore do? Previously, they asked it when he was around to ask, but now they try to stay true to it without him being physically here with his sad passing over the summer. That doesn't feel like a way that they would end it. But as far as, like, the character goes, where he's at right now, I could just see it being like, if he was staring down the barrel and it was the final moments of his life and he knew he was going to die, he'd be like, okay, yeah, well, that's my time. And after all, there is that tombstone with my name on it waiting for me back in Harlan. They said you'll never leave Harlan alive. They've got me now really invested in, I want him to crawl out of this. I want him to deal with his issues. I want the end of the series. Again, he doesn't have to be a lawman when this thing wraps up. He doesn't have to, continue along the path of being a marshal. Back when he first found out Winona was pregnant, he was okay with moving to Glencoe and just being a firearms instructor there. And it seemed like for that fleeting moment that he would be happy in life if he did that. I just would like to see that. I would like to, like you said, he work is a way of avoiding dealing with this stuff. He seemed to use the Crow situation tonight to avoid going to Florida, which, ultimately his girlfriend saw through how that went. He doesn't want to deal with stuff. I want to see him get to a place where he's going to deal with these things to where he is going to be, more appreciative of those around him, but be able to feel the love more from the people around him who want to believe in him. And I believe to this day Art still wants to believe in him. I hope that's where they progress with Raylan as a character. I hope that's what the writers are doing, because they've got me invested, and I suspect you very much the same way, in wanting to see him beat these personal demons and come out better at the end.
Absolutely. Some people are compelled to say that it has to end a certain way, and it doesn't. I've never believed that it absolutely. Your big star player does not have to die for the story to come to a close. So much so that if it's one of those things where it's in the heat of the pursuit of the greater good and he's a casualty in it and we all move on, I guess some people would like that. But I'll say this. Raylan dying at the end and that being the reason for the end of the series is so not okay with me. Try to wrap your what would Elmore do noodle around this. I would rather a situation unfold where somebody's watching his career and persuades Raylan Givens to run for the House of Representatives than I would see Raylan Givens die. And I don't think anybody in the Justified camp would ever go that route because a spin-off show just doesn't make any sense and it wouldn't work. But the demons thing, absolutely. There has to be a moment of clarity, and I think that's what's going to happen. I think the end of season 5 is going to be more, from where we sit today, I think is going to be more closely tied to the evils that Raylan is facing within his inner person than it is Crowder, the Crows, Ayla in prison, Mexican cartels. I think it's going to be more, there will be a turning point in Raylan than it is we'll get closure on the storylines we're following currently. And I think that's critical because at the end of the day, we talked about this I think last week, at the end of the day, we may love Boyd Crowder, and we may think that this Crow thing is a stroke of genius or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's a story about Raylan Givens. And all the other stuff is window dressing. And it could be interpreted that what's happening inside Raylan is actually more impactful than what's happening literally.
I think so. And you kind of had to remind us all of that point last week because we were talking about this. I made the comment that this has been a Boyd-dominated season between the two. We've spent a lot more time talking about Boyd and his arc and his continuing storylines than Raylan, and you brought it back, and you said ultimately this is a show about Raylan. So in a subtle way tonight, by emphasizing those things about his character and his inability to just stop being a prick at various points in time, as he was to Wendy tonight, who, whatever else you want to say about her, she was trying to get back her kidnapped son. And maybe that's a point in time where you refrain from, sticking the needle in somebody and saying, you owe me when this is over with, which he couldn't stop himself from doing. So in a subtle way, maybe they were kind of reminding us tonight of your point from last week that Raylan is the guy that this revolves around. But ultimately, again, we're kind of left grasping here at the end of tonight as far as where this is going, how this kind of advanced any of the storylines. Boyd now knows he's onto the Crows here a little bit. He's going to try and stay a step ahead of him because he knows that Daryl Jr. has hatched some kind of plot to try to get the better of him, so he knows that. You got the thing with Ava in prison. That advanced kind of incrementally forward here tonight as she's moving towards getting a drug pipeline set up there. Raylan has not yet figured out what is going on exactly with Boyd and with the Crows, but now that Mexico has been mentioned to him, maybe he spends some time working on that next week, chasing down that lead. What were they doing down there? So, again, everything still looks very opaque as it did to us a week ago. Maybe that just tells us that we have some real big, shocks and crashes coming our way in the last 5 episodes.
Yeah, again, I've always had the impression that this episode was going to have that snowball effect, and that whether it be all in the final episode or the last few, that it's going to catch speed fast, and a lot of stuff's going to go down. So I can't wait for that, naturally, but like every other Justified season to this point, it's all about the journey, and ultimately the details will unfold as we want them to. One quick last thing I want to mention just before we close this out is, aside from all of the letdowns of tonight's episode and how it wasn't all that epic, how great was that moment when we have Boyd/Crow family facing off against the Federales, and they're trying to pass off this religious subtext with Daryl Crow Jr. talking about how we've all been to jail and found the goodness of the Lord and whatnot. And, of course, you look at Boyd, and he's in a 3-piece suit, essentially, sans tie, with the pocket watch and all of it. It's not hard to sell visually, but then you come back, and then you even see Dilly doing the signing of the cross on his chest, and you got to go, oh, my goodness. They are actually trying to pull this off.
What's very funny is that in real time, as we're recording this, that's exactly the point of the replay on FX. I'm actually watching this spell out as you're describing it, literally live here. That was funny. That was outstanding. And going back to, you talk about going back to season 1, playing off of Boyd's background legitimately as a preacher. That's a guy who can, spout the scripture at you pretty much on command, which I have always found to be an interesting thing, just because my best friend is a fundamentalist, and he always rags on me as a Catholic, that basically we kind of outsource that. I don't exactly know what this thing is, that thing, whatever. I know what I need to know, and he kind of rags on me because he's the type like Boyd who could spit out any specific thing that you ask him about. But, that really was interesting. That was one of the highlights of tonight's episode. And, again, while it didn't wow us, I think it would take another 1 or 2 of these in a row to where we would sit here and I think really be dissatisfied. And, again, Justified really handles the pacing well. If anything, something like this, the law of averages, Jason, says that next week might just be absolutely huge. So, in a sense, I'm almost kind of bracing myself because shows like this one, Breaking Bad, whatever. There was one in the first half of the final season of Breaking Bad, and it left me really dissatisfied, but I was like, oh, the next one's going to be huge, and it was. Justified is the same kind of show. I feel they're setting us up for a big one. I'm going to call it now, 5.9. I'm not going to say it's going to be on a par with Shot All to Hell, but I think it's going to be much bigger than this. That's my guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to draw comparisons from Breaking Bad, you're not alone in the people that have told me if you're going to watch the final season, make sure you can nail yourself down for those last 5 or 6 episodes. You're not going to want to do anything else. And that's the impression I get. If it's 5.9, great. But if it's, 5.11, 12, 13, then I'm fine with that too. Either way, I think we'll finish it out satisfied.
It's going to be huge, and we're going to be here to do it. And, hey, on a night like this when, again, 5.8 left us a little bit cold, again, not in a way where we're necessarily complaining because we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, but as far as how was it as an episode, certainly not on a par with some of the other ones in terms of entertainment value. I am glad that my faith in us was justified, as it were, as always. We managed to keep ourselves going through. We managed to get to a lot of points, make sense of it, as always. Looking forward to 5.9, what I think is going to be epic, and certainly another epic recap with you, my man. Thank you very much, Jason.
Yep.
Catch you next week, my friend. Thank you all for tuning in. Mini episode 388.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, waitresses, strippers, bartenders, garbage men, janitors, microwave popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and the Periodic Table of Elements.